Cool. So there's a pretty obvious undertone, or at least for me, there's a pretty obvious undertone to a lot of the talks here, and essentially it was connection, right? This level of connecting people, ideas, platforms, product roadmaps. Yeah, being able to understand that as individuals we can't do it all ourselves. As a firm, we can't do it all ourselves. But as an industry together, we can do it, right? We can surpass a lot of these hurdles that we're facing with change and adoption and so on and so forth. So kind of a slightly open-ended question. How can you express the value of some of these collaborations, right? Whether it's putting someone into your immersive room or the app you're building, or the dialogue that you're having with people within your firm or people within other firms. How can you essentially talk about some of the rewards that you've seen by doing a lot of this? Internal rewards, this was worth it sort of thing, like aha moments.
I'll start. So I think, to kind of keep on topic with my presentation, I think for us, one of the big values is just the ability to have more voices be heard in our process. And I think that, that's something that we've seen both internally and externally. Being able to use multiple means of communication, I think has actually opened up people to be more comfortable and expressing some of those ideas. And then I think, externally as well, just allowing more ways during our design process for that feedback to come in and have an impact.
Just to piggyback off that, I think participation equals trust, and all of this stuff, I mean, whether it's down with like in building and construction and details and fabricators, all the way to community board engagement, to internal communications. The more people are able to participate in the process, you might end up in the same solution, but it's truly that process of communication in sort of real-time cadence, seeing why the decisions were made, why there's challenges, and having some agency to voice opinions and participate. And the trust goes such a long way in terms of aligned mission and achieving, project goals.
I will add that questioning some of the design decisions and some of the processes that we're doing, as soon as you're showing all these different technologies and communities, then designers and everybody starts looking at it differently. And I think that's key, because then you start understanding what are the possibilities out there. Can we do this? Can we do that? How do we implement that at a larger scale? I think it's the understanding of what's what you've shown that it's key, I guess, is in my situation. So.
I've been in conversations before where, so for a small period of my life, I was on the product side as well. And the whole concept of, the customer's right, let the customer drive the product in a way, like became a no-brainer. And in a different lifetime, when I was a lot more hands-on, interacting with designers and getting to hear their gripes during happy hour was kind of like indirectly me being a product person, like understanding where there's opportunities for improvement and all that. There were things that I was learning that I didn't know I was learning until I got onto the product side of things. So what are some, now specifically more for Peter, now having been on the architecture side, having done tech at architecture and now doing tech for an industry, if you were to hypothetically say, go back to architecture, right? What are some of the things that you've learned or are still learning that you would bring back to an architecture practice that we can all learn from or should adopt?
I thought you were going to give me the easy question of what from architecture did I take to software development. I wasn't expecting the reverse question. But actually, I mean, to not to shy out of an answer, but to be honest with you, I do think there's more to be brought in from the industry to the development than in reverse. But no, I think if I was to do the reverse, I think the emphasis on stability and reliability is something that I would probably push a lot more. Now, obviously, again, when you have so many users today, reliability is key. Like you cannot afford your software to break when somebody has a deadline. That's just a no-no. And it could be manageable if you were working, again, creating tech in an AEC firm, and maybe your work only affects 10 people, 5 people. I don't know. When it affects tens of thousands, then that's not something you can afford. But I do think that, especially because of the industry we work in, there is a barrier to adoption where if you pick something up and it doesn't work the first time, you probably don't want to pick it up again. I mean, I've run into that so many times building tech for AEC. So I think if I was to go in reverse, I would put in a lot more effort into not just doing more, like, hey, more features, more cool stuff, but I would make sure that resilience is there and the stability is there so that it can be mission critical. Because if you don't have the stability, your tool is going to be the first to get dropped when something doesn't work.
Cool. Are there any other, going on to the architecture side, you guys are also developing applications as well that are now starting to become user facing and more publicly, as you kind of introduced today. What are some of those kind of takeaways that we all could learn from?
I guess I can kind of echo what Pierre was saying, because we develop all these internal tools, and the designer is not going to pick it up again if it breaks. And there's a lot of times that we just sort of need the validation from the design teams to tell us if this tool is useful at all. And like, for example, with the on-site or the Street View tool that we built, we were able to convince the client with we like cut down from 8 options to 3 on site on the spot. And so that really validated, that particular tool. And so that kind of fuels the energy for us to keep going in that direction. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling on here, but like basically, like it's a two-way process or two-way street, right? So we want to keep the communication open. We cannot really like hypothesize anything and just like think, okay, yeah, because I'm from an architecture background. I can think like them, maybe like because I've been removed from that industry or from that, design phase for a while. There's things that I need to catch up on. So yeah, just kind of speaking in general terms here.
Also, I think add to that in terms of the software development mentality, it's modules that have to work. It has to be interoperable, and with that, there's like schemas and standards. And I think there's a lot. Not that we need strict templates in architecture to always do the same thing, but the idea of creating and understanding, being specific about the kind of setup of a project and how you're making decisions, and having parts of it. The tools have to work, so you trust the tool. But for that to work, there has to be some schema or standardization of how you're like setting up, structuring a project. And when you do that, there's huge efficiencies on the sort of back end of having it do a lot more to automate quantity takeoffs and visualization and sort of documentation standardization. So I think we as an industry can be more cognizant of having a kind of interoperable approach too, and plugging into tools, analysis tools, and engaging a wider ecosystem of design evaluation that we normally wouldn't if everything is a one-off.
Yeah, there's always kind of this kind of switch the topic slightly. This there for decades, our industry was always kind of like this master apprentice kind of one-way mentorship sort of thing. And I use the word master specifically, even though it's to emphasize the kind of derogatory nature that it's being put under these days, and kind of like the magnifying glass that it's put under. And I love to hear Alex's comment about the reverse mentorship, right? With that master apprentice approach, it was always like, no, I am always right, and you have to do what I say. But now that I think you made a comment that the barriers have been lowered, right? So what have you seen at your firm that allowed this to engage more without that individual or those individuals feeling like they are being left out or they're too, for lack of a better word, too old to engage?
I think the simple answer is that they kind of didn't have a choice. And I think they were probably, the pandemic has humbled us all in different ways, right? And I think for people who had been resistant to digital workflows and that environment, I think they kind of quickly learned that in order to continue our businesses and our industry, that we really needed to adapt and we needed to learn those. And so I think that was probably I'm trying to think of something else to say besides that, but I think that was probably the biggest thing of why it happened. But I think also, on the opposite side, those people who knew the technology, they're also like humble in their kind of approaches to our leadership and helping them ramp up and not making them feel like they kind of didn't know what they're talking about. They took the time to explain things and, to really be sensitive of, the kind of knowledge that they had as well. So.
Yeah, we saw the same thing in our office. It was upper management. We were teaching them how to do a lot of these things, and it was the weird thing is they were all in time at the meetings during the pandemic. All Miro and all these things and sharing models on the webs, phones, and things like that. And yeah, there's something that they were like, hey, how do we do this? How do we learn from this? And that's kind of key, that when they're asking those questions, then it's that opportunity for us to introduce other things as well.
Yeah. But I would say that, kind of after this, I think they have learned to embrace that reverse mentorship more. It wasn't just like a one-time thing because they had to do it, but I think that experience has had a pretty long-lasting effect.
So I've always felt that architects made good candidates for interface design, both in the sense of what we see on our screens and so on and so forth, but also as methods of engagement. And I guess kind of coming from all of you folks, and this is the last question I'll ask, and I'll open up to the audience. Am I right? Is like my thinking correct? Or like, are we actually good candidates for interface design? Are we good? Since we design spaces for people, we're already designing for humans, right? Are we good candidates for this, or do we suck at it and should we actually hire somebody?
All right, I'll try. Well, maybe it's a bit of both. Like when I was still at NBVJ and we were really ramping up our kind of internal development, kind of like what Shop's doing. We asked the same question and we came to the decision that for us at the time, because we were so new to the game, we hired somebody dedicated, and they did have some experience in the built environment, but they were a designer first and foremost. Because what we saw is that a lot of the people we have internally might have the technical skills, like, yeah, you can wrangle Photoshop and Figma, whatever. But when it comes to thinking of an experience in a totally different medium, aka virtual and not physical, not necessarily everybody could make the intellectual jump, right? And guiding people through a room, I mean, it is inherently different than guiding somebody through an app. It's a different part of your brain. It's a different way of interacting. So I think it's a bit of both. I mean, but there are, I think, even if you look at the kind of the newer startups in the space, I think there are a good number of former architects that make up those groups. And I mean, that's not without reason, right? So I think it's a bit of both for me.
I see nods of yes, so we'll just go with that. Anybody from the audience? Yes, in the back.
A bit of a loaded question in a room like this, but how dead do you think architecture is in some of these systems building out?
So I'm just going to repeat that for the audience online. So how dead do you think is the industry of architecture for the tools that we are building? Or how are we killing it with the tools that we're building? Okay, so how are we killing the industry with the tools that we're building? We are building, yeah.
I think if I answer that question, then I probably shouldn't have this job. No, look, but I don't know. For me, it's if I'm ever in a position where somebody says, "Hey, Peter, here's some evidence that you're killing the industry because of this product." I mean, that's an immediate red flag to stop what you're doing, right? There's no other way. I mean, we could go into specifics product by product, right? I don't know that that's necessarily the case that we want to do right now, but I think just going back to my little Venn diagram earlier, I think the most successful software products are the ones that prioritize the needs of the industry. It's not something that you try to force on somebody. So in essence, I mean, it should enable creativity. It should enable engagement. It should democratize this thing that we know and love as architecture and design rather than do the opposite. So that's our goal at least. But, you know, if you have the feedback that Enscape's killing architecture, please send it to our support department, not to me.
I think to add on to that, it goes back to some of the discussions earlier, which is really about, you know, the idea that these tools augment what we do as architects. And I don't think that we should be afraid of certain things being automated or certain things being augmented. I think we should embrace that, and we should figure out how do we create a better built environment, you know, using these technologies. So yeah, maybe it changes how we work as a profession, but I don't think it changes what our goals are at the end of the day and the need for architects.
And to piggyback off that, I mean, I think there's arguably there's a lot of inefficiency in the process of design and delivering architecture. And I think, you know, there's a lot just the nature of the process, you know, concept schematic is, you know, it's a very small portion or percentage of the why we're doing it and what it is a small percentage to the how it gets done. And I think if we, you know, the more real time and sort of access and the more efficient we can make the how, it's not to do the same buildings faster. I mean, right now, you know, it's becoming increasingly expensive to build, and, you know, we're escalation. The idea isn't to just shorten the time to put out the same buildings. Like, we can hold ourselves, the how and why can get a lot more involved, and we can hold our designs to a much sort of deeper criteria. So I don't think it's killing it at all. The idea would be that it's sort of enhancing and holding it up to higher standards, I think.
I will add it allows you to explore other avenues of technology that would help you through the design process. So I don't think it's killing it at all.
I think my little take on that is that even just recently through one of my news feeds, I got one of those photos of the architects of the 1960s and 70s with the white shirt and a black tie leaning over the drafting table. Between then and just before CAD came out, right, our industry was evolving. And hey, guess what? Our industry is continuing to evolve. That's the continuous change that's happening that we may not be noticing. We actually may be noticing a lot more now just because technology is advancing faster. So don't, and I think a few folks here mentioned it, don't think that technology is going to eliminate architects, but it'll change what we do and how we see things. You know, you look at bankers and lawyers and everything, a lot of their industry is changing too, right? They still provide a legal service, financial service. We will still provide an architectural service to build, beautiful, affordable spaces for human habitat, right? It's kind of how things are, at least from my opinion. We have a question up here, and then I'll take another one from our guests online.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, for all these in-house tools that you're developing, is there a demand from the client, and are they willing to pay for it, or is the client the actual designer?
So the internal tool development, I mean, it's interesting. The contractual models of getting involved in some of the deeper sort of means, methods, fabrication stuff, contract models don't necessarily support that. In terms of the internal tools, at least our stance on it is the way we're building these are homegrown tools to make our internal processes more efficient and to give faster access to client. That the idea that meetings can become quicker. Again, we're not doing it sort of for commercial gain other than, the experience, the user interface of Shop is better. Therefore, you have better relationships with clients. The product is better and you get more projects and you're, I think performing better work. So for us, it is worth an internal investment. We're strategic in how we do it because, sort of unsupported R&D. I think we're careful with the threads, and I think we maybe present a disparate threads. We're very careful that is actually woven into like a tapestry that makes sense of where we think like it's all leading towards a specific direction. But it's to your point, we're not charging for access to the app and that kind of service. It's saving time, quite honestly, for us internally and externally. So I don't know if that answers.
We see it the same way. I think it's R&D development and tool development and looking at those things. Our clients are not asking for like carbon neutralization tools for the project, but we're bringing them to them saying, hey, we have a bunch of this processes and tools that we can offer. But it's all internal for us.
So we have a question from our online audience. This is specifically for Peter. From a business model standpoint, this is what happens when you're the odd man out, right? From a business model standpoint, what can AE firms learn from the product side?
From a business model side, okay, all right. Okay, I'm ready for this one. All right. Well, the first one is don't do any work without getting paid first or without getting a contract signed. Like number one, I remember the first time I told that to somebody, I think it was a relative of mine in the business world. I said, hey, we get half the project done without a contract being signed. And they were ready to just backhand me right then and there. Like, you're no son-in-law of mine. But no, I would say like, yeah, look, business goals are inherently pretty empirical, right? It's something you can measure. Numbers, whatever they may be, whether it's sales, whether it's revenue, you need to set goals, you need to measure them, and you need to know what your value is, right? Because I think it starts with education for me, but this profession is conditioned from a very early age that your time is worthless and that you also are intellectually somewhat not that valuable. That's not the case. I mean, it's just not the case. It's a very complex profession, both on the design and the delivery side. So I think it's set clear goals, performance goals, track those goals. And don't sell yourself short. Do a little competitive analysis, see where you fit in terms of billings, profitability, blah, blah, blah. And decide if you're fine with that, or if you want to improve some kind of efficiency or maybe one of those metrics that you define, but be empirical about it. Don't just say, well, okay, this month we did some work or we broke even, so it's all good. No, it's got to be a continuous challenge, and for the right reasons, I think.
I think there was a question in the back earlier. No? Yes, Andrew. So to repeat that for the online audience, are there other value adds to the clients for a lot of the services, applications, R&D, and so on that is being developed here? Are there other kind of value adds for architecture firms? Okay.
I guess I'll take that. In the asterisk to the last comment where we are, it is worth the investment to develop these tools to make a better user interface with our firm. That is a huge value add. That said, additional augmentation of tools of I'd like to track, start maybe using this for facilities operation or things that we know kind of inevitably these data rich models have an opportunity to do more. Yes, we have sent out proposals recently to do kind of bespoke augmentations to a baseline of services, of tech platforms. So we certainly, the intent is not to create a commercial tool, but in service as an ad service, if there's augmentations to things we can do, we're absolutely interested in that. So yes, I think it's a long-winded way of saying that there is commercial opportunity in tech development.
Cool. I want to thank our panelists, our speakers for this afternoon. Give them a round of applause.